How's it going, folks? I'm Matthew. This is Lemora's Cards, and today we're going to be looking at a CDH tournament that took place over the weekend. This is a 76-player in-person CDH event. Took place over the weekend, and it had a really cool-looking metagame. We're going to dive into it, but I really wanted to cover this one because we talk about a lot of doom and gloom, mid-range hell stuff here, but this was a very turbo-pilled metagame, so I'm really looking forward to breaking down some of these decks. There's some really cool stuff here, too. I think it was one of the more interesting tournaments that took place over the weekend with like the top 16. I think you guys are really going to like this one. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking, commenting, subscribing. Let me know down below what you like about this video. Which of these decks was your favorite? Go get yourself some Into the AM apparel. They have such awesome shirts. Ones they sent me were so great. They're so comfortable. And you get 10% off just by using my link in the description. Thank you again to my amazing patrons over on Patron who get access to early videos like this. Get to submit deck lists for the tournament report videos like we're going to take a look at today. Submit questions for the podcast, all that good stuff. So that being said, let's hop right into it. Up first, we're going to take a look at the meta breakdown. We're going to look at the most popular decks in the event, kind of get an idea of what the tournament looked like, and a decent idea of what decks were doing well. As pretty much always, we had Tymna Kraum at the top of the list, but kind of like our last video, not a very good conversion rate for TNK. 12 entries with only one top 16, so 8% conversion is way below what TNK is usually putting up. Strong showing from Najeela. We got 5 Najeelas, 5 Rog size. Again, it's very turbo pilled. 4 Kraum Teveshes, 4 Tivits, a lot of Krarks showing up over there. Decent amount of Kinnans, Sisays, and then we kind of go down the list with a couple 2-ofs and 1-ofs. So relatively diverse. There's a lot of 1-ofs showing up, and really only TNK as like the big standout in terms of numbers, and it didn't even do very well. All right, let's take a look at our first list. We have a Tevesh Kraum. I'm going to try to keep this one similar to the last video where it's fairly brief, going over some of the standout cards, just giving you a general overview of the deck. If there's something that stands out, we'll spend more time on it. If not, we'll kind of move it along just to keep it brief for you guys. It already looks like a more mid-range slant. We have the Dothy, which doesn't always show up. Talion, which is more grindy, and then Hullbreaker Horror. Kitten is like, I think it's slightly less of a staple now. I've seen some opting not to run it. I mean, it still goes absolutely insane with Tevesh. And then Hullbreaker Horror. This is one of the more standout cards. It doesn't usually mean like, hey, we're not nosing because we have a 7-drop. A lot of the lists, like Sharkies, tend to run Hullbreaker and nos. There are Hullbreaker lists and there are non-Hullbreaker lists in it. So it looks like we're going maybe more mid-rangey, but we'll see. And then we are on the 2 wheels, so Twister and Wheel of Fortune. Opting for Twister in a breach, what's presumably a breach deck. Not always the most popular. You know, usually they're either on like Wheel Windfall or they're on like all of the wheels, like most of the Rockside decks that then go for Time Twister. But it is like, I mean, these are the only 2 cards that guarantee you draw 7 cards. So that's, of course, very relevant. If you're not familiar with Tevesh Kraum, they usually run this card, Mystic Reflection, which is really at its most powerful with Tevesh. So you can Mystic Reflection on, a dock side plus Tevesh, make 2 dock sides. Super sick. Like anything you get to make, anything you can turn those thralls into is just massive upside. And then can be used, as like interaction. You can use it on one of your thralls when somebody casts a dock side and it's kind of a bit of a counter spell. None of the Alchemist Retrieval, Drown in the Loch, those kind of cards we see in the mid-rangier Grixis list sometimes that I like to complain about, especially Alchemist Retrieval. Again, we are on the Nos. Posture Mech, Curse Totem. Again, we have all of 1 activated ability among our creatures, right? Dothy Voidwalker. Pretty standard for the Skull Clamp, of course. Great Tevesh card. We are in the Necro. Course, we're on the greatest card of all time, Born Upon a Wind. Not really, but I love it. And then Final Fortune. So we have 2 really good payoffs for deep Necros. And then we are on the 27 lands. Urza Saga has a decent number of targets. You can grab the Jeweled Lotus. Being able to grab Skull Clamp is a really nice bit of flexibility too. Kind of in the middle of, I mean, it runs kind of a decent amount of cards you'd expect for Tevesh Kraum. Had a nice top 16 placement here. Now we're looking at a cool one. We got Dargo Silas in the chat. Definitely think this is my first time covering this list. It's a deck I've been kind of aware of, but haven't taken, I don't have a lot of experience with it. Slim creature package, pretty similar to like Rog size, other than we have this Forerunner of the Coalition. Enters the battlefield, search for library for a pirate, reveal it, put it on top. Another pirate enters the battlefield under your control. Each opponent loses 1 life. So this has 2 bits of flexibility. 1, it tutors for dockside. Pretty nice. And then also this can, when you're doing Dargo loops, where you get to cast and recast Dargo over and over and over, you get to kill everybody. Cool piece of tech for this deck specifically, having that dual flexibility. And then Mayhem Devil, that's also going to be an outlet for our loops, and also can just be a card that just takes over a board in CDH. You go absolutely crazy. Grape Shot, another way to be like an outlet after we infinitely cast our commander. Transmute Artifact. We'll take a look at the artifact package and keep this card in mind. I have a couple ideas where it might be leading us. Bitter Ordeal, one of, I guess now 2 Gravestorm cards. So this is another way we can win the game. We're going to build up Gravestorm as we sack our Dargo, and then we get to exile your opponent's entire libraries. I'm curious if this ever gets cast outside of that. Using it other than that, it's kind of like using Praetor's Grass to mess with an opponent. But I guess if you can even just crack a bunch of treasures and then cast this and just search your opponent's libraries for like all of their win cons, like that's probably reasonable to do. I'm curious how often that happens and versus how often it's used to actually win the game. We're in black, so we're going to see some really powerful cards that work with Dargo. Burn Offering lets us make a ton of mana. Sacrifice lets us make 7 black mana. Pretty good. Culling the Weak lets us sack a thing. Like lots of really powerful cards here for our commander. Muddle to make sure. This card was a lot of times used in Sans Blacklist. A good example would be like Bruce Thrasios would use this kind of card because they don't have, one, they're more reactive, and then also they don't have a lot of the black tutors. I've been seeing this card just come up more. I mean, having a card that says search for Dockside or search for any half of Thassa's Oracle Tainted Pact, pretty good. So in our artifact package, we've got Baubles. This is pretty cool to see. These are basically like mana crypts for Dargo. Reduces Dargo's cost by 2. Spell Bomb, kind of mana neutral if you're casting Dargo, and it actually does a thing, Chromatic Star. So they are leaning into they're definitely running some slots that are really cheap and just kind of efficient cyclers anyways, but that also have good synergy with their Dargo. Grinding Station, Cursed Mirror, just a pretty good red clone. Then we see Cloudstone Curio, lets us go infinite with our Dockside. Phyrexian Altar and Relic of Legends are both part of Dargo loops. If we're able to cast Dargo, sack it, keep casting it over and over with Phyrexian Altar, because Dargo's cost will be reduced equal to its commander tax each time. And then Relic of Legends can do a similar thing where if you're able to play Dargo, tap it down with Relic, sack it, play Dargo, tap it down, Relic, sack it. You can start netting mana with this or just have a different way to kill it off. Goblin Bombardment is another way. Again, if we have these two work especially well together, same with Bergie. If we can go mana neutral off Dargo and then sack it and ping people, then that's a way for us to win. Meathook Massacre is probably just good. This card and what's the red one? These effects are just probably good. They just have been really good for me. And then also have another thing in play that is, if you're sacking Dargo, you get to kill the table. Great Furnace is usually a downside. Having an artifact land is usually a negative. And Dargo list, it does give you the flexibility of sacrificing it to net extra mana. So we got that and the Vault of Whispers. I think especially if you're not expecting a lot of artifact hate, they're not as bad. But of course, the best piece of artifact hate in our format is Dockside Extortionist. Next up, we have Magda showing up. So we're going to expect a lot of dwarves. We do have those. And then treasure makers like Ragavan, Dockside. So we do have the one dragon, Realm Scorcher Hellkite. And the enters the battlefield with his bargain, add 4 mana, any combination of colors. If you get to do the Magda thing where you make infinite treasures and then get to search your deck for all your things, you can search for Realm Scorcher Hellkite and then just pump your treasures into dealing 1 damage at everybody. Roaming Throne, one of the best new cards for this list. Double all your Magda triggers, double all your dwarf nonsense. Very light on the sorcery slot, Vandal Blast and J-Will. Removal and then kind of the best interaction that we have access to. I'm a little surprised not to see Tybalt's Trickery. Lots of removal for things like Drannith Magistrate. There's so many things that shut down this deck. If there's a Bowmasters in play, you have to get rid of it. It's just so easy to shut down Magda, so that makes a lot of sense. Chalice, these vehicles for cheap. Grafdigger's Cage, it doesn't affect us too much with the package that we have, and it's probably not really ever going to shut off anything that relevant for you unless you were just going to grab Roaming Throne. If we get to go infinite, one, we'll have other ways to kill players more than likely, but then also we could probably just tutor for things to get rid of our cage if we need to and then go off decently high on the stack. So Torpor Orb in our Dockside deck, not always the best, but we also don't always have Dockside. And getting to slam that after your Dockside is nice. Tangle Wire, Cloudstone to go infinite with Dockside. KCI, yeah, that's a thing we could tutor for. Sack our cage if we need to. If we've already gone infinite, and then we can win any way we want to. We do have the Karn Lock with Mycosynth Lattice. Ubermass is interesting. So this can stop draw engines from being especially good. Do we have a lock with it? I don't think we do. Can be spooky into Drannith, but one thing about Magda is if nobody gets to cast any spells, Magda probably just gets to win. I mean, of course, that's why they do stack stuff. Really flexible package here with Magda, things to grab up, and then the kind of best lands we can use. So we are on the Mishra's Workshop. Nice. Another good showing by Magda. This has been I don't think I've seen a top 4 that recently, but showing up in the top 16s more. I think the deck definitely has legs. There's been stuff that's messed it up, but especially if you get into a mid-rangey grindy game, it can be this really inevitable feeling that Magda is just going to win at some point. All right, we have a Tymna Kraum. I think our only Tymna Kraum of the top 16. Let's take a look at what it looks like. We got the Delny. We are on the Reanimate. We're on Jessica's Will, which is not that common. I've seen it in a few of the more like turbo-oriented TNK lists, but maybe it's just, good card. Also, I think some of the Japanese players were higher on this card than we were. We got the Angel's Grace. Makes our Nas good and helps us not lose to Thorgal sometimes. No Nas. So we're not making our Nas good with Angel's Grace because we're not Nasing. Really not expected after seeing like Jessica's Will show up, which of course this card doesn't really help cast Nas, but like, you kind of expect a deck that's looking to explosively make a lot of mana, they might run an ad Nas, but no Nas here. We'll see if there's something else that makes that make more sense. Artifact package just very standard beyond Imposter Mech. They're just valuing clones a little bit more, and then they have the One Ring. Blind Obedience, not one we see all the time. Dress Down, also not one we see that often in TNK since it's so creature heavy. 27 lands. Tarnished Citadel is the only real standout, and then they are a Cavern of Souls deck. So no Nas. I think that's a reasonable thing you can do sometimes. Honestly, the biggest thing I like about no Nas, and then this is also no Necro list, your life total is not that likely to be pressured in a game if you're, if you tell the table, I'm not on Nas, I'm not on Necro. I honestly think, at least in my experience, it ends up making your Tymna worse if you tell the table that though. So there's almost no reason not to run the Nas beyond if you just don't think it's not good, because I actually like people attacking me and leaving no Tymna blockers behind. Often people don't have the ability to, attack you very meaningfully and leave up lots of blockers. I actually like running Nas or not even telling the table I'm not on Nas, just because it makes my Tymna attackers way better. All right, now we're looking at Atraxa. Dorks, clones, value engines like Archivist, Lotho. Yeah, boy, we got the Brina. I'm going to call it out every time I see it. This card has started popping up so much more recently. I love it. We are on Endurance. I know the Endurance player doesn't win. I specifically like Endurance in food chain decks, which this is, because it can help you just go off with, like, it can be 0 mana, make 4 mana. When Endurance is a ritual, it can win you the game. Otherwise, it's not that great. Italian, we're grinding. Makes sense. We got a million mana commander. No Neoform and Eldritch Evolution. That could be notable. Those are usually good cards in these colors. What is this? Sorting. Yeah, Psychrift, Pact, bunch of counter spells, and then artifacts. Another Imposter Mech showing up a decent amount here. So we do have Kitten Teferi. We've got Food Chain. We have Brina Beats. Lots of good win cons. Actually, this is like the only deck where this is the case, but I think this is what I expect in the enchantment slot. Like, I think Atraxas tend to like Carpet, like Blind Obedience. They Food Chain, touch the Spirit Realm. One can flicker your Atraxa and be amazing, and then also is just, helps against creature combos, things like that. And then Smothering Tide. This is a deck that really benefits from that. And then pretty cool land package that looks really blingy. I'm guessing this is what this player's actual deck looks like. Sheesh, look at these expeditions. Gorgeous. Okay, let's look at a Tivit. We already are seeing 2 planeswalkers. Narset was like pretty close to a staple. It reads really well because there's so many draw engines. It makes sense to just shut them down. The biggest problem is there's just so many creatures. Like, look at it. This is, this isn't even like a green deck or something. There's 15 creatures here. Like, no Fimage, no clone at all, actually, which is a little uncommon for Esper colors. They're usually on at least the 1. Metamorph specifically has gotten its stocks gone up a lot with like the printing of the One Ring. But here we're just running like our own engines. We've got Sheoldred to punish draws, so we're really leaning into that. Talion, of course, the draw engine. Urza is just a super sick card. Shauna's Tidebinder is a card you should probably be thinking about more. This is a stifle effect that people are running. Whether you think it's good or not that relevant, but this is a stifle on a creature. You got to be able to play around this card, or at least know about it. Time Twister and Windfall, I wouldn't normally expect necessarily in Tivit, but when I saw the Narset, I figured we would. Almost surprised there's no Notion Thief. No Languish, which I think I like. I don't really think Languish is that great at 4 mana. I think I like the Dam better. Mana Drain, another Muddle to Mixture, another Delay. This looks like an Ian interaction package right here. Notably no Nas. A lot of the Tivit players don't run it, even though, like, I'm going to guess if we look at the bottom, you could probably run Nas in this deck. So no Tithe, which has been decently popular in Tivit. And then the mana base, we do have Manamo, which is okay with Tivit, but mainly I'm guessing there for the One Ring. Let's see, like, what's our mana value? 1.36 with lands, 1.93 without lands. So our average flip with Nas is 1.36. I think it would be pretty good. Probably lower than Roxai. All right, we got the first Kinnan of the bunch. Let's see what we got. Forensic Gadgeteer. This is a new one from Karlov Manor. When you cast an artifact spell, investigate, and then artifact abilities cost 1 less. Believe it or not, this goes infinite with Basalt Monolith. It's not that common for Kinnans to run something that helps their Basalt go infinite. They usually just rely on the Kinnan. This lets you go infinite without Kinnan, which is unless you have another payoff, it's not always the best thing in the world. I mean, it's obviously having infinite mana is better than not having infinite mana. The other thing that this card can do is if you have Kinnan and Grim Monolith in play, your Grim Monolith will tap for 4, and then, so normally it can't go infinite with Kinnan, but it's going to cost 3 to untap, so you can go infinite with Grim Monolith or Basalt Monolith. We're on the Dosin, based. We're on the Clover Impersonator, also based. Lots of big flip things. We got Nezahal, Hullbreaker, Tide Spout, Void Winnower. Rest of the stuff's pretty standard, though we are on Devoted Druid combo, so that's another thing we can do here. Artifacts, the only standout I expect is, Machine God's Effigy lets us go infinite with Devoted Druid. We are on Inventor's Fair as a way to tutor up our win con. Okay, we are halfway through our top 16, and so we're going to look at a patron submitted deck from Just Joe. So we're looking at another Atraxa list. We got the Italian, showing the Endurance again. It's defendable. It's defendable when food chain's around. We got Teferi, doing Teferi Kitten. So kind of similar to the list we looked at before. We're on the Delighted Halfling, of course. The biggest downside of spending mana on Atraxa is that it's counterable. Of course, Delighted Halfling, that's the big thing with Tivit. People used to always say, what if they counter your Tivit? Well, if they counter my Tivit, I probably have good cards in the deck anyways. And the Phyrexian Metamorph, I like a high density of clones in Atraxa. I think it makes it so hard to beat. Here, we're on the Eldritch Evolution. I think Eldritch is just so good. I think this is one of the better green cards, to be honest. You're able to turn your Dork into, like, anything in the deck. Dork into Thoracle, Dork into Opposition Agent, Dork into freaking Ranger Cap. Like, it's just so good. One of the better Culling Ritual decks. And then we are on Deluge as our board wipe. The board wipes always suck to play in green because you almost always lose something, but like, also sometimes you just have to do it. Man, this Noxious Arrival looks crazy. So no Nas again. We are on the Mana Drain. Probably, pretty close to it at its best in a deck like this. I really like all the retro frame. Like, he gets all of them. There needs to be a retro Jeweled Lotus. I think if almost any card ever deserves a retro frame, it's Jeweled Lotus. It's kind of surprising there isn't one. I don't know if Witch Claw Talisman will ever get one. That's pretty random. But here's a piece of tech that I like. This is a card that I've kind of been high on, Black Market Connections, especially if you're not nosing. Also, I wouldn't mind seeing a Sylvan Library too. So let's look at the mana value. 1.39. Again, you could totally reasonably nos here, just like be an in-step nos deck. But like, Black Market Connections is a great thing to put your life into. Spending 3 life a turn to draw a card and get a treasure, pretty good, especially in Atraxa. That's a card I'm pretty high on. And then, of course, I like Smothering Tithe. Tithe has just been insane in every single game I've played it. And then our mana base, we are on Cavern of Souls. You can name Phyrexian and get both Phyrexian Metamorph and Atraxa uncounterable. So keep that in mind. All right, we're looking at another Tevesh Kraum, and we see another Narset as well. Okay. And the Notion Thief that I talked about. Okay, see, this is what I like to see. If we're going to do this, let's do this. Pretty similar creature package, barring the Notion Thief and then the Narset. So if we're doing this thing, this is kind of what I expect to see. We have Time Twister, Wheel of Fortune, Windfall. We're running basically all of the playable wheels, barring Wheel of Misfortune. I think that makes a ton of sense. And then we have Reanimate Dockside, Reanimate Orchid Masters, Reanimate Hullbreaker Horror. It's good. Here's the Alchemist Retrieval. I did play this card the other day and it kept me from dying, so I can't complain too much. We have Born to Final Fortune, so I expect a Necropotence. We are on Nas. We got the Conqueror Slow, which I don't think we saw in the last one. Doesn't seem like it would be that great, maybe at face value, but of course you can put this on a Thrall. You do have creatures that you're going to get into play. Big tournament for Imposter Make, it seems like. And then the Necro we expected, of course, Breach. And we are on 27 lands. Nothing really standing out about the mana base. We've got Alana on Rogsai. This is the kind of the old standard creature package. I know some of the lists at this event were on like Fimage. A lot of them have gone on to that card now. This is more like what we saw, a few months ago. Grim Tutor has been a card that goes in and out of the list, depending on the player. Infernal Plunge, kind of the same. It is pretty nice to have that extra bit of oomph that can help you power out something early turn 1. I found that I liked Infernal Plunge when I played the list. Grim Tutor, I like it because it's technically gas, but it is the most expensive gas for what you get. It and Praetor's Grass, like honestly, both of these cards. Praetor's Grass can be nice because knowing that card's in your deck can mean that early consult for a payoff or Tainted Pack, it's like one extra sort of win con in your deck in case you go through a lot of it. It's just something you have to think about in this list. And it does look like we cut the Wheel of Misfortune. That may be what the Grim Tutor went for, because it's not uncommon for Rockside to go Twister, Wheel, Windfall, Wheel of Misfortune. I've liked the card in the deck. Wheel of Misfortune I found is really at its best in the deck when you have a lot of resources and you just need that like payoff because now is your window, but it's the worst for when you're behind and you need a wheel, I think. The one deck that runs Days. I love getting people with Days. It's amazing. Tutors and Rituals. Then Artifacts. We're on the Flail. That one is one that kind of comes in and out. All looks up to code. The Grixis Enchantments for our Grixis Enchantress deck. And then 24 lands. A pretty standard Rog Shell that's opting to go like down a wheel, up a tutor. essentially. We're running all of the Final Fortune effects, so that's normal we'd expect. So, and then Get Probe is a card that's come in and out. I was high on this card and then I was low on it, and I think thinking about it right now, I'd probably be decently high on it because lately I've just been wanting to like do what the Japanese players do and run Thoughtseize and Duresses and or Cabal therapies and just see if the coast is clear if I'm running a Turbo Shell. So the worst thing about it is like if you play it into like, you know, Ristic, Mystic, and then your free spell is no longer free anymore. All right, so now we've got Najeela. Dorks, Esper Sentinel. I mean, this is about what you'd expect for 5 colors. Kutzel is a warrior, Grand Abolisher, most of a Grand Abolisher at least. I mean, I don't know that's necessarily the cut, but I would guess Ranger Captain came out for Kutzel. And then we got our 2 creature combo outlets, Derevi, Grim Hireling. We got the 1 clone. Lots of good cards for Najeela. We got Savines for Breaching, Meme Bet, Eldritch Evolution to go grab, you know, turn a Dork into a Derevi, boop, I win. Both packs, so on the Summoners pack, which is probably better now, you have the ability to get Tinderwall as a ritual, Elvish Spirit Guide as a ritual, Kutzel as a way to stop interaction, Samut as a, you know, way to draw cards, and then Derevi as just a win con. Like, so Summoners pack actually has a lot of flexibility. No quick reflexes, which is one we've seen. Veil is probably better in a list that's like, I mean, they're running all the win cons that this deck can run basically, so Veil is a little bit more flexible to just like start a turn Veil, force them to have it, kind of, you know, using it like a silence, and a 5-color mana base. And now we're getting to look at a Krark the Thumbless. No roaming throne? Dang. So lots of Krark doublers, things that get pay us off of flipping coins, lots of things that trigger off casting spells, kind of what you'd expect in an Is It Manual Storm list. Extract. Search target player's library for a card, remove it from the game. The player shuffles his or her library. This is kind of like that Gravestorm Bitter Ordeal. You can kind of use this as just a way to win. Curious to see how it's used the most. This isn't a card I'm super familiar with in the Krark Sakashima list I've seen at least. And the Festivities is ridiculous in this deck. Same with Strike It Rich. Pretty close to what I would expect here. Man, Finale of Promise, if you win that flip, you probably go absolutely insane. A lot of cards that on their surface, not that great, but you know, if you peek and you copy it 3 times, you got a better Ancestral Recall. You do have the Brain Freeze, which I do like to see. I like the full Breach combo in pretty much any deck that can run it. I don't even care if you have the tutors. This deck gets to draw so many cards and filter and loot and just run Breach combo. And then a bunch of free spells that just like have insane value in Krark Sakashima, where you can just Mog Salvage can just blow up all the art. It can be just like a 0 mana Vandal Blast at instant speed. Lean on the Rocks, not liking the Talismans. And then a mana base that's pretty standard. It's like on the slightly greedier side for 2 colors, I guess. All right, and we have our top 4 coming in at 4th place. We have Kraum Tevesh with another Narset. Looks like Narset's back on the menu and another Notion Thief. So looking almost identical to the list we saw earlier so far, I think. So I figured this was very similar to the last list that we looked at. And it is. There's 4 cards different. So the one that got top 4 is running Snap, Grinding Station, Spell Pierce, and Defense Grid over Conqueror's Flail, Mystery Reflection, Alchemist Retrieval, Fimage. I think Sharky is one who yelled at me about Alchemist Retrieval being good and then it cut it. Defense Grid over Conqueror's Flail, I think makes a ton of sense. I feel like the list at top forward, I feel like the cards are on average better. Just the ones that they went for here. Fimage can have good targets, but you don't even run that many creatures. Snap is insane. Grinding Station is another way to win. And your reanimation deck, like there's just things you can spike and hit. Spell Pierce is just way better interaction than like Retrieval or like Mystic Reflection, which is like more of a cutesy card when you're already winning with Tevesh. And then I think Defense Grid is just better than Conqueror's Flail. So very slight differences, but I think they represent what looks to me like a leaner deck that's like kind of more focused. And even though it is only 4 slots, I like these 4 like swaps a lot. Then we have a pretty exciting one. We have Sam Black, notable, literally one of the best Magic players of all time, at a, you know, decently large CDH event. I was hoping to play with Sam or see Sam at like the Boil and other events that they talked about going to, but I guess didn't make it to. So I've been really excited to see Sam's list, and I thought they were going more mid-range, but this is Turbo Rogthras. So let's take a look. So in the command zone, we got, 2 bangers. Rograk is just like one of the best commanders ever printed, and then Thrasios, just one of the most stable commanders ever printed. We've got Cloud of Fairies, Devoted Druid, Baron, Magda, Teamer, Teferi, Atali, Emrakul. It just gets wilder the more you look. Let's break it down one at a time. Cloud of Fairies. This is probably a Gaia's Cradle deck. That's good. there are probably lots of ways to combo with this card, or at the very least, just make it pretty good. Devoted Druid is a combo you can run with Thrasios. I think the main outlet in this list is going to be Machine God's Effigy. If I had to guess, we'll take a look. Gilded Drake is just a good card. I actually think Gilded Drake stocks are a little bit higher right now, in my opinion. It isn't really the most turbo card, so seeing it in a list called turbo, nobody's trying to on the play power out Gilded Drake because it doesn't do anything. Kinnan is busted. Magda is a cool one. I'm curious what the Magda package in terms of tutors looks like. Just the creature package, there are none barring Phyrexian Metamorph. There's no dragons. But we know about the Machine God's Effigy. Also, this thing is just a 2-drop that makes treasures every turn. Baron Master Wizard can go infinite with Dockside. Trophy Mage to go grab Assault. Doing Kitten stuff because we're doing Teamer stuff. So we're also doing Teamer Sabretooth to go with Dockside. So we have lots of ways to combo with Dockside. So Teferi, 5 mana flash. Creatures you own that are on the battlefield have flash. And then each opponent can cast spells only anytime they can cast a sorcery. So this card is both most of a Grand Abolisher that you can flash in on an instep, which is really nice. It's also part of a Born Upon a Wind if you have an insane amount of mana, right? Cool thing you can do, someone puts a win con on the stack. Flash in Teferi. Creatures are pretty hard to counter. Presumably people have already tried countering the win con. Flash in Dockside. Any of these Dockside loops work at instant speed because you're bouncing them to hand and you can cast them as though they had flash. So any of your Dockside loops work. Teferi, notably not creatures that are in your hand, which you'd think it would be. Just creatures you own that are on the battlefield. So flash in Thrasios, draw your deck at instant speed, counter all the things, nobody gets to win. You can even just straight up win for the most part at instant speed because you just keep flashing in Atali and bouncing it over and over and over, which is super sick. And then Atali. Atali is a little hard to make sense of. It is, so pretty much any of your wins involve you being able to infinitely do any of the things that your deck has the ability to do. So if you're out of ways to win the game, you can use Atali and then infinitely flicker it, exile everybody's library. That will win on your own, but then you can also just cast all their spells and win. I don't know that it has any real synergies with the deck. I mean, yeah, you can top deck Tutor and then Atali, but you're not getting a discount on anything other than Emrakul. This could just be a thing you cast and it does stuff. So I'm really curious how the Atali has played out. I can kind of see some of it. I'm curious if there'll be anything else we see. And then we got Emrakul. This is a really cool card. If you've watched my Japanese coverage, you know that there are players who just run this. There are American players who do it too. I've seen it in Nimr's list, for example. It's really hard to interact with. You have to have a stifle to stop the first thing. It's weird because this is more of a mid-range, really hard to beat card where you get to just cast this. The thing basically happens. The effect almost always happens unless someone just has Tishana Sidebinder or something. And then you get to just wreak havoc in a mid-range game where you target the person who's drawn a million cards and then you take their turn for them, do some absolute shenanigans, and then throw the game to yourself. You try to king make yourself best you can. And then you have a 13/13 that's really hard to remove also, if even if that doesn't win the game. And then again, you could potentially loop it here in this deck. I think if you can get to that position, there's almost no reason. You could probably win in another way, but I don't know. We'll see. Transmute, we're basalting. We are on the wheel in the Time Twister. Lorien Revealed, if you're not nausing, I actually think when I goldfished this deck a little bit and the Lorien Revealed was actually feeling really good. The Land Cyclers are just kind of nice actually. And then the rest of this is pretty standard. Lots of interaction, Crop Rod to get our Cradle. We got the Psych Rift. Archdruid's Charm is another new one from Karlov Manor. Lets you search for a creature, which is already pretty good. And then you can also just put Cradle into play. I'm assuming you're opting for the first one most of the time, but then you can, exile an enchantment or artifact, of course, and then use it as a kill spell or as, a bite effect. And then this is kind of what we'd expect. We have Snappy with Cradle stuff that we can do. Expedition map, we really like. I'm assuming Cradle is our main one that we're getting. We have Cloudstone Curio to also win with Dockside. Relic of Legends, which is just good, really good with Rog Thras specifically. Machine God's Effigy, like I said, this can just be a clone, can also just win the game with Devoted Droid. And then we are in the One Ring. Mystic, Wildgrowth, Ristic. What's the thing that we missed here, folks? There is no Underworld Breach. Now, I know Sam has an article about this list, and I think has found that the Breach cards are just not that great on their own. Honestly, when I've played Teamer, in Dargo Thras, I'm sure LED is at some of its best. I think the cards are just playable because any of your infinite wins, you can Brain Freeze. So you just infinite whatever and then Brain Freeze everybody and you win. LED is probably the least usable, though I think it is usable here. Again, I think it's better on Dargo Thras, but there's things you can do with it. And then Breach itself I think is actually really strong because it can just be at the worst it can be a regrowth that also can just win. So whether or not it goes here, I'm assuming Sam has tested, and obviously, like I said, Sam is one of the best players ever. It seems like it should. That's my, the CDH player in me talking, as someone who thinks it's the best win con in the format. Let me know down below what you think. Number 2, we got Dargo Ikra, one of the most freaking based decks of all time. Gilded Goose. It's like the best mana orc with Dargo because it makes stuff. Makes Dargo cheaper just by tapping it. Xanted Swarm's our closest thing to a, Grand Abolish, or at least on a creature. I'm sure we're on defense grid. Razaketh is a way to win. So this deck is just like chock full of things that win. Utilizes Razaketh add-ons, Dargo combos, fast compact layer deck. Win the game as soon as possible. It's high density of 1-card win cons. Razaketh, 1-card win con. Nas, 1-card win con. Like lots of Dargo shenanigans that are 1-card win cons. So we got lots of these sacrifice effects. We got Infernal Plunge, Reanimate, Yogg Will, just like a jund stuff that let's just churn. Only the one wheel, no Wheel of Misfortune. Burn Offering, Culling Ritual, Sacrifice. So tons of ways to make mana with Dargo, like we saw earlier. Guttural Response is a way to protect our stuff. Same with the 2 Veil effects. So we got Birthing Pod, but why are we on Birthing Pod? Well, 1, Dargo 7, Razaketh 8. Do I need to say any more? If I do, Dork into Dockside, Dockside into Burgi, Reanimate Dockside, turning your commander that you can spend 1 mana on into a Razaketh. It's pretty good. And then here we have Altar of Dementia, which lets us go like kind of crazy with Dargo and Breach, or just mill everybody. It's just another way to win without having to like actually ping to deal damage. But we also have Goblin Bombardment. Greater Good, one of the best cards we get here for green Dargo decks. So no Life's Legacy, which is another one that has been like a standard for Dargo decks. Curious why Connor doesn't like that card. I don't have a ton of Dargo experience, so I don't know. And then Pattern of Rebirth lets you have a creature, it dies, you get to put Razaketh into play. Pretty good. Then 25 lands. All the soul lands, basically. No Phyrexian Tower, though. Super lean deck. If you watched it on stream, I think in the top 16 game, you got to see Connor just body everyone on turn 2. Just go land dork turn 1. Turn 2, I win the game. Get wrecked. And then the list that won it all. Probably not what you expect. That is Tameshi Reality Architect. This is a list I got to play against once, but I didn't get to see it do a lot. I played against this player at the Boil. Whenever 1 or more non-creature permanents are returned to hand, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. So anytime you bounce something of yours, you get to draw a card. It's got to be non-creature, but it has X and white. Return a land you control to its owner's hand. Return target artifact or enchantment card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. Tameshi is an outlet for any kind of infinite bounce thing you can do. Like for instance, Hullbreaker Horror. If you get to start bouncing things, you can net infinite mana. One of those you'll draw, then you bounce Tameshi, then you play Tameshi, then you bounce the thing, then you draw. It's a couple more steps than like a Thrasios line, but you get to draw your deck. You can also use this to recur things from your graveyard. Something gets into there. You can return, for instance, Phyrexian Metamorph. And now I don't know a ton about the Tameshi specific stuff. Keep in mind both these abilities, and then also keep in mind like it is just an outlet for getting to do infinite stuff. Spellskite to protect our lines. Walking Ballista, we can, we have a Hullbreaker Horror, so of course we have ways to net infinite mana, and we probably have more as well. Get Probe, Reshape, so lots of tutor, artifact tutors. Supreme Verdict is cool. Probably pretty, and Azorius is probably about the best board wipe you're going to get. Transmute, Windfall, Seagate. So no Twister, we are windfalling. No Twister makes sense. We're recurring things out of our graveyard. Interaction, we got Pact, Offer, Fluster, Muddle the Mixture, another way to tutor. Winds of Rebuke. It does let us trigger, if we're bouncing our own stuff, lets us draw. Messes with top deck tutors. This is a card that used to be like a staple in like every deck, I feel like. Pretty standard stuff in the instance, like the best blue-white cards that we have access to. We got 23 artifacts. Let's see what we can do here. So we have Codex Shredder, which is a way to mill and then also buy something back. If we're able to keep bouncing Codex Shredder, we could mill everybody out, mill ourselves. Grafdigger's Cage. I guess we're not doing any of that. Again, it does shut down like Phyrexian Metamorph, but that's about it. I guess also tutoring for Spellskite. For the most part, this is going to hurt everybody else way more than us. Got Imposter Mech and Machine God's Effigy as ways to clone things and go off and go crazy. So let's look at the really unique cards and try to figure out what's going on here. Spell Bomb. We get to bounce the thing and go with the Tameshi. Lotus Bloom is really cool because we can put this into play, mill this, get into our graveyard anyway, and then spend 1, return a land, put a Black Lotus into play. So that's really cool. Surveyor Scope. 2 mana, tap, exile it. Search your library for up to X basic land cards with X the number of players you control, at least 2 or more lands than you. Put those cards on the battlefield and shuffle your library. So this is a way to kind of recoup some of our costs on returning a bunch of lands to play. We can go really low on lands, doing our Tameshi stuff. Pretty big cost, returning a land to your hand. Enchantment. So we've got Counterbalance, Rhystic, Mystic, Artificer's Intuition. Blue. Discard an artifact card from your hand. Search your library for an artifact card. Current mana costs 1 or less. Reveal that card, put it in your hand, shuffle. So we can discard a Lotus Bloom, put a Lotus Bloom into play. We netted mana. And then go search for like whatever thing we need. We can search for the Shredder, the Spell Bomb, Portable Hole, the thing. Again, this is a list that I might be missing some synergies on. I don't know how many people are experts on this deck. I have, like I said, I only played against it the once and I didn't get to see it do a lot. Trouble in Pairs is a really cool one that I think, especially if you're in Azorius, you got to try this card out. Extra turns are shut off for your opponents. And then You get attacked by 2 or more creatures, an opponent draws their second card, or an opponent casts their second spell each turn, you draw a card. So this triggers off. Like, I've seen this card in play, it triggers a ton. Then we got Mind Over Matter, choose and discard, tap or untap. Another way to discard things. Then also, like, we can go bonkers with some tap untap shenanigans. We can go crazy with the One Ring, put it into play, start tapping and untapping stuff. Very cool. And then we have artifact lands, that makes sense. Manamo, again, makes sense. Treasure Vault, Urza Saga. Definitely a lot of overlapping stuff that I hopefully haven't missed too much of. I see like a decent amount of synergy at least. Tameshi is a very odd card. When you read the text, there's all these different weird restrictions, but I think it's super cool to see a deck like this get to top. And again, recently we've seen like decks like Unctus, like monocolor decks, other 2-color decks that have like topped. And then this one we got to see win a major event with a lot of very good players at. Very cool to see. If you enjoyed this video, let me know down below what you liked, what you'd like to see next time, and which of these decks was your favorite. Which one do you want to try out? Personally, I really want to put together the ROG Thrasios list from Sam Black and try that one out. I'm also really curious about Tameshi. I'll maybe have to try that and take me a while to figure out how to do it. But anyways, with all that being said, thank you so much for watching. And as always, go play CDH. Have a good one, everybody.